Kim Kardashian had a life that anyone could dream of. She was a prominent figure in the showbiz world, with her own media and fashion empire, with successful media projects, strong revenue, and a large fan base. Kim was not only a celebrity, but also a symbol of success. Everything in her life seemed perfect, from lavish parties and meetings with powerful people to extravagant vacations. Kim had built an image that many wished to have, but few knew that behind the glitz and glamour was relentless effort and a weary heart, constantly battling feelings of loneliness. Then one morning, as Kim woke up, the familiar sense of peace she had grown accustomed to seemed to vanish. She looked out the window, seeing the first rays of sunlight through the gaps, but couldn't feel the joy the light usually brought in the large mirror of the room. Her reflection seemed tired, somewhat sluggish, as if all the life had been drained from her long ago. Kim got up, stumbling over to her desk where she had placed her phone. A clear sense of realization hit her. She hadn't received any calls or messages. Everything was eerily quiet, unlike her usual routine when she would be bombarded with calls from partners, friends, or industry contacts. Then, a sudden message popped up on her screen. The company has decided to change direction. Thank you for your contributions. Kim read the text again, unable to believe her eyes. She had founded the company, had poured her heart into it, but now they had decided to fire her. With a wave of emotions rising within her, Kim placed the phone down, feeling as though the world had stilled. She couldn't believe that all the effort she had put in seemed to matter so little. The company she had given everything to had now turned its back on her as though she had never been part of it. She wasn't even notified before this decision was made. It all came down to a simple, gentle message. Kim stared at her phone's screen, then at the partition, trying to find her own reflection, but only seeing a faint shadow. The complex feelings inside her were impossible to describe. How many times had Kim thought that the company, everyone in it, was like family to her, the years spent building together? The hectic but passionate hours now returned with indifference and coldness. Kim couldn't understand why she had been treated this way. The people she had cared for, trusted, had now decided to cast her aside for some benefit. She didn't know what they were thinking. Had they ever truly seen her as vital when she was an irreplaceable part of this empire? Or did they only view her as a pawn in a larger game? Outside the window, dry leaves fluttered in the wind, as if sympathizing with Kim's mood. She sat down in the chair, her gaze dimming as deep thoughts settled in. Everything had quieted, and she didn't know where to start again. The projects she had invested so much time and effort in now seemed meaningless. Kim felt like a tiny shrimp in a vast ocean, abandoned when the big waves came. Kim stood up and walked to the mirror, staring deep into her eyes. She no longer recognized herself. Everything in her life suddenly felt meaningless. The calls from partners, the compliments, all now just hollow sounds, no longer able to reach her heart. She felt the emptiness inside, not just from losing the company, but from the loss of trust that had been built. She opened her phone again. Another message from her former manager, a new collaboration offer from a competing company. She read it, then read it again, feeling disappointed. The new company wanted her to join, to participate in projects they considered more suitable. But Kim couldn't think about starting over. It was too deep a wound. She wanted to rise, but didn't know where to begin. Then another message came, this time from her mother. A short message. Are you okay? Can I help with anything? Kim couldn't reply immediately. She felt like no one could help her anymore. Everyone around her just saw her from the outside. never understanding the feeling of being abandoned, cast out of a life she had given so much for. Overwhelmed with disappointment, Kim decided to set the phone down and leave the room. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, but didn't feel like eating anything. A life now felt meaningless when everything she loved and trusted had gone. It felt as though she had no value left, except for an old name that had been left behind at the door. But still, she had a choice. She could sit there, cry for what she had lost, or she could stand up and start over. Kim wasn't a quitter. She knew that. No matter what she had lost, she still had herself. And in that moment of realization, she decided not to let the pain defeat her. She would quietly swim against the tide. It would be her revenge, but not through words or explosive actions. Kim would rise up and prove that they would see that she didn't need anyone to succeed. She would prove that, even if she had been defeated, she could still win. Kim sat in her small apartment, the dim light filtering through the window, not strong enough to dispel the heavy atmosphere that filled the room. She had lost the company, and the old friends now seemed like faint shadows in her memory. Yet, despite no one knowing, Kim had started a new battle. This was not a fight she would engage in with words or impulsive actions. No, Kim was not that kind of person. She knew that, unless she stood up on her own, everything she had built would be nothing more than ashes. So, she began to act, quietly, with no one knowing. She realized that silence was not passivity, but a strategy. In the early days, Kim did nothing but plan, gather information, and analyze every corner of the industry she had once led. She began to relearn the things she had neglected, the things she now had to rebuild from scratch. On the early days of the week, Kim simply sat at the desk, jotting down ideas, strategies, adjusting every small detail in the projects she had left behind. Kim's journey was not easy. She had to face the shocks from her competitors. They were not only continuing to grow, but had also started doing business with partners she had once been close to. The new projects she had invested so much energy in had now become part of their portfolio. Even worse, some of her former colleagues openly criticized the decisions she had made in the past. Those words hit hard, shaking her pride, but Kim didn't let it disappoint her. She remained silent, took note of it, and continued working. One morning, when she woke up and looked at her phone, there was a message from her former manager. They sent her an update on the latest project, informing her that they had expanded the campaign Kim had started. There was no thank you, no offer of collaboration, just an update on what they had done. Kim put the phone down and looked out the window, although these situations seemed to assault her trust. Kim did not let them occupy her mind. She knew that, if she wanted to rise again, she would have to do it alone, without expecting help from anyone. Day by day, Kim began to rediscover her creativity. She didn't just stop at learning what had been lost. She also began to restore what could still be salvaged. Kim continued to develop her ideas, creating new strategies for market entry, testing new business models that she believed in. She didn't just want to prove that she still had value. She wanted to prove that she could start over each day. Kim woke up with a fresh mindset, ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Throughout this process, Kim had to face loneliness. Her old friends no longer reached out to her, and although she could find solace in her family, she also understood that no one could truly understand what she was going through. She had to rise on her own every night. When the light from her desk lamp reflected on her face in the mirror, Kim would ask herself, "Do I have the strength to come back?" But then she would push the question aside, focusing on the work, because she knew that only action could erase any doubts. One day, Kim received a call from someone from her past, one of her strategic partners from previous years. They said that her new company needed her help, that they needed her creative expertise to reach the market. The call was not just an invitation for collaboration, but an opportunity she could use to mark her comeback. Kim smiled lightly, not out of joy, but because she knew that this was the first step in her journey back. Kim began to focus on more work. The marketing strategies she had developed before were now restructured and reorganized. Every task had a clear objective to prove that she could do it again without the help of anyone. She didn't need to directly confront the people who had betrayed her. Kim knew that as long as she proved herself with results, if successful, people would have to look at her differently. But this process was no easy feat. During preparation, she had to test countless ideas. The competition was relentless, and the pressure was mounting. They tried to defeat Kim, not only by launching new products, but also through extremely aggressive media strategies. Each time, Kim remained silent, working even harder, not allowing herself to fall behind. Whenever she faced difficulties, she thought about what had happened in the past, the betrayal, the criticisms, the wrong decisions made by others, and resolved to rise even stronger. A month later, Kim's company began to show signs of recovery. New partners started showing interest in what she was doing. She received more invitations for collaboration, and each time, she remembered the painful days she had endured. However, now, Kim no longer felt hurt. She had learned to transform the pain into motivation to move forward. Kim could feel a shift in the atmosphere around her. While everything seemed stable on the surface, deep inside, she couldn't shake the vague feeling, the sense of something yet to come. The silence no longer frightened her. It had become a weapon she used to prepare for the next step. Beneath that quietness, Kim had devised a strategy no one could have anticipated, a quiet but powerful move, where she would not confront those who had betrayed her directly, but instead prove herself through results and the changes that came from within. In the weeks that followed, Kim not only reinvented the structure of her business, but also rebuilt her image in the eyes of the public. Each new product, every media service bore her personal touch, especially the marketing strategies she applied, focusing on emotions and a deep connection with her customers. She didn't just want her products to be loved. She wanted consumers to feel a real connection, because each of her items could become an essential part of their lives. She had transformed from the founder of a company into the leader of a completely new, independent, and stronger brand than ever before. But this transformation was not without its challenges. Just as Kim's business began to recover, a twist occurred. One of her former competitors, someone who had once worked with her at her previous company, began publicly criticizing and dismissing the successes Kim had achieved. They declared that Kim's products were mere knockoffs of low quality, and that her strategic products were simply copies of ideas they had introduced earlier. This angered Kim, but she didn't let her emotions take control. Instead, she focused on proving that their words and actions were just attempts to reclaim the spotlight Kim had dimmed. A new battle began. But this time, Kim was no longer the defeated one. She remained silent, refusing to respond to the criticism. She didn't need to stoop to their level and engage in dialogue. Every move she made was carefully planned. Her marketing strategies were not only attractive, but groundbreaking. Her competitors began to feel the pressure. Kim started to attract attention from new partners, people who saw the potential and creativity in her work. They no longer viewed Kim as a failure, but as someone who had risen and started anew, stronger and more determined than ever before. The pinnacle of her transformation came when one of Kim's former trusted collaborators faced a major setback. Rumors began circulating about their shady dealings, pushing the company into a financial crisis. Kim hadn't known about this situation, but when she learned of it, she didn't feel a sense of satisfaction during the months before. This partner had not only helped her fall into failure, but had also made her decisions seem insignificant in the eyes of many. Now, as they faced the consequences of their deceit, Kim simply sighed peacefully. She hadn't let herself get drawn into the previous conflict. Instead, she had stood up and found herself again. Kim began to realize that while things were improving for her, the betrayers were increasingly exposed, having to face the consequences of their actions. No longer was Kim the person who depended on the recognition of others. She had become a stronger individual, one whom even her competitors had to respect. She didn't need to confront them directly. Everything she did was producing clear results, and that was how she proved her true worth. One late afternoon, as Kim sat in her office, looking out the window, she didn't feel pride. All her efforts were steadily being acknowledged. She had overcome the most difficult phases, and now was the time to continue rising. Her products were not only loved, but were receiving endless praise. Every advertising campaign she ran was a massive success, and she was no longer a shadow of her past. When she entered the meeting room to meet with new partners, Kim sensed the difference in the way people looked at her. They regarded her with a respect she had never received before. She knew that. Despite being betrayed and cast down to rock bottom, she had proven she could rise again and make a real change in the industry. Those who had abandoned her were no longer the important people in her life. Finally, as she waited for results from an important deal, Kim received an unexpected message. It was from her former manager, the one who had left her and contributed to her downfall. The message was short. "Thank you for what you did for me. I now understand that I was wrong." Kim looked at the screen, reading the message again, but this time, she just smiled lightly. She had overcome all the trials, and now she no longer needed to prove anything. Kim knew that she had avenged herself with her own success. Kim entered the most crucial stage of her journey after all the trials, exhaustion, and failures. She had reached the peak she had longed for. Every effort and all her achievements had finally paid off. She had not only regained what she had lost, but also exceeded all expectations, proving that she could start again, stronger and more visible than ever. Those who had turned their backs on her, those who had once mocked her, were now beginning to realize the true power of Kim Kardashian. Throughout this time, Kim had remained silent. She didn't confront the betrayers directly, nor did she react to their criticisms or try to prove her worth by publicly criticizing them. Instead, Kim used results as her voice. Every media campaign, every new product, every business initiative reflected the creativity and dedication she had poured into them. The results she achieved forced people to admire her, to look back at what they had done in the past, and to question whether they had been wrong to dismiss her. Kim's company was now not only thriving, but leading the market. Her products had become symbols, not only for their quality, but for the story behind them. Kim hadn't just rebuilt a company. She had created a brand filled with emotion, one that connected with customers on a deeper level than ever before. She understood that in business, value doesn't always come from the product itself, but from the story the product tells. And the story Kim was telling was one of resilience, of never giving up, of rising from the ashes after a deep fall. But Kim's success wasn't just measured by numbers or revenue. What mattered more was the shift in how others perceived her. She was no longer the one left behind after every second chance. She was no longer the person her competitors had once seen as easy to defeat. Kim had proven that when pushed to the bottom, she didn't just fall, she knew how to rise stronger than ever. At the same time, her former company, while still operating, began to face unavoidable difficulties, the wrong decisions made in the past, political conflicts within the organization, and a lack of vision had caused the company to weaken. They couldn't retain loyal customers, and the products they launched no longer brought the same innovation and appeal as before. Those who had betrayed Kim were now facing the consequences of their own choices, and Kim, the one who had once been abandoned, was now leading the way, proving that she didn't just rise, she had gone further than they ever imagined. One afternoon, as Kim was working in her office, she received a call from an old partner, someone who had stood by her side when everything was flowing smoothly. They called to thank her, to apologize for the wrong decisions they had made in the past. They admitted that they had failed to support her, and now, looking back, they felt regret. Kim didn't respond with surprise or gloating. She just felt a deep sense of peace. She hadn't needed them to prove her worth. And now, when everything had been settled, they realized that they had missed a huge opportunity. Kim didn't answer the call immediately. She didn't need to. She had proven everything through her actions, through what she had accomplished, not with words, but with deeds. Those who had once abandoned her were now facing failure, not because Kim had made them fail, but because the simple choices they had made had led them to this point. The betrayal they had shown her hadn't just affected her, it had affected them too. For failing to see the value in someone who could truly change the game. Kim's story was a testament to resilience, to never giving up, to starting over not out of vengeance but because of self-belief. She didn't need to criticize or confront those who had hurt her. She just needed to rise and show that, when all the trivialities fade, the person she truly is would be the deciding factor. And now, as she looked back, she didn't feel hatred or anger, only a profound peace. She had faced challenges, fought against herself, and now she understood that life wasn't about winning or losing. It was about getting up after every fall. When Kim looked in the mirror, she didn't see a failure. She saw someone who had won not by defeating others, but because she had won for herself. She didn't need to prove her worth to anyone. The results she had achieved spoke for themselves. Kim knew that. No matter who turned their back on her, she could stand firm because she had come to understand that true value doesn't lie in what others think of you, but in what you've accomplished and how you face the difficulties life throws at you. At the end of the story, Kim stood up and walked outside. The sunlight bathed her face, marking the beginning of a new chapter. She didn't need to do anything more. She had proven everything, not with words, but through her actions. Kim sat in her office, looking through the large glass window, her eyes following the cars as they sped past on the lively street below. She had become so accustomed to this view, yet today, it felt different. Everything had changed throughout the past time. She had embraced silence and walked down a challenging path without showing any sign of weariness. Now, looking back, Kim realized that every fall she had experienced was merely a stepping stone that had allowed her to reach new heights. She was no longer the person of her past. She was ready to return and reclaim everything. Although Kim knew she had endured turbulent times, she no longer wallowed in past memories. Instead, she focused on what was to come, and her only goal now was to make her comeback not just a simple restoration, but a whirlwind that would take the industry by surprise. She didn't want to return just to continue where she left off. She wanted to prove that when pushed to the bottom. That's when she would rise stronger than ever. Kim could not accept becoming a mere shadow, and she was determined not only to regain control of the company, but to make it flourish in a way that was stronger and more distinct than before. One morning, when Kim received a call from a former partner, someone she had worked with in the past, she sensed a shift in the tone of their voice. No longer was there hesitation or distrust, but true admiration. They invited Kim to join a new project, one she had missed out on when she was with her old company. This was the opportunity she had long awaited, but also a complete challenge that she had to face. She knew that those who had once turned their backs on her would not easily accept her return, but this was exactly what fueled her motivation. Everything she was doing now wasn't just about reclaiming the old, but about building a new image, one of Kim as a strong, empowered leader, someone who would not let anyone extinguish the fire within her. Right after the call, Kim began formulating plans for the future. She wasn't in a rush. She knew that a comeback could not be achieved by a single grand gesture. Instead, she focused on small, steady steps. She rebuilt the relationships she had once cultivated, met with old partners, and joined projects she believed aligned with her new vision. Kim was no longer just a founder. She had become the leader of a new industrial revolution, one that she was creating herself. Every decision she made wasn't just about responding to past betrayals, but about confirming that she would never be a loser. At the same time, her former company, though still operating, began to show signs of weakness. One of their key partners encountered a serious financial dilemma, causing them to lose trust with their customers and partners. Kim didn't feel happy about their silence, but she couldn't deny that this was part of the law of balance. The people who had abandoned her were now paying the price for the wrong decisions they made. She didn't need to jump into this fight. The truth would speak for itself. One afternoon, Kim received another call, this time from a former friend whom she had trusted deeply. They called to apologize for what had happened in the past, admitting that they had failed to stand by her. Kim listened in silence for a moment before calmly saying, "It's okay, I understand. What's past is part of the growth process." She no longer felt anger, just a sense of peace. Kim didn't need to do anything more. Those who had betrayed her had now revealed themselves. She just needed to keep walking her path and let everything unfold. While Kim's former company struggled with internal issues, she took strategic steps to reclaim her place in the market. Her marketing strategies had completely evolved. Kim didn't just want her products to be liked. She wanted consumers to feel a deep connection to her brand. She started focusing on building a community around her products' people who truly believed in the value she provided. The emotional marketing campaigns she developed not only made her products stand out, but also created a sense of closeness, as if each product Kim created carried its own story. As Kim entered the new phase of her development, she no longer feared the challenges ahead. She saw every problem as an opportunity to prove her strength. And at this moment, the competitors she had once viewed as threats were now the ones who had to look at her with respect. Kim hadn't just reclaimed her position, she had surpassed even greater challenges, elevating her company to new heights she had never imagined before. Finally, when Kim stood before an important event where she would present her new project, she felt that everything had come full circle. Everything she had done over the past months had led to this moment.